Welcome to the Read Your Keys podcast. I am your host, Joel Lopez, and today on this episode, I have my friend Abe Lopez on. He is an author, and you can find him on Twitter at Abe Lopez Author, ABELOPEZ Author, AUTHOR, and his website is the same, Abe Lopez Author. Abe, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So a fun piece of trivia. We were trying to record this, and the record button, we recorded, and it kind of kicked us off, and I didn't realize it was off. So we're trying to get this again, working through technology. Sorry about that, Abe, but thanks for being a good sport, buddy.
Yep. We'll just hodgepodge it. That's fine.
Yeah, this is the way it goes. So we try to. My goal is to make this as organic as possible. And so we had already kind of talked through some stuff. So we'll see if we can make our way back and talk through some of the stuff. But I just think for sure that we do want to get back a little bit into your story and a little bit of your history. Okay. So Abe, can you go and just give us a quick bio synopsis?
You mentioned that I'm an author. I grew up here in Colorado. Actually, originally my parents are from Mexico. My siblings were actually all born in Mexico, so I was the only kid that was born here in the United States. And we immigrated over to Colorado. And like I said, my father was worked for the railroad for a little while, and also worked for agriculture. And most people don't know that part of Colorado, the south central part. There's a valley, San Luis Valley. That's pretty. It's got some really good potatoes. They always say they're better than russet potatoes in Idaho. But we ended up there, and that's where I grew up for the most part. And I've bounced around a little bit. In high school, I moved to Nevada with my stepdad. I've also lived in Arkansas and Virginia, so I've kind of been a little bit of everywhere in the United States.
Which place probably played the biggest influence on you?
Probably Colorado because that's where I grew up, and I was there till I was about 15 or so. Yeah, so that's probably the place that I know the best. Nevada was nice. I grew up in northern Nevada, so I'm always away from the big cities. So I didn't grow up near Denver in Colorado. Didn't grow up near Las Vegas in Nevada. But it was interesting as well. It was out, in the middle of nowhere, and in Fallon, Nevada. And then I've also lived in Northwest Arkansas, and then Northern Virginia as well.
Those second two states, was that more like work related, or you just kind of wanted to go check it out and see what's going on?
Yeah. In Arkansas, I actually worked for a place in Nevada. They had an office in Arkansas, and that's when I moved over here. And then I ended up going back to school, back to university, about 10 years after I graduated from high school. I ended up getting my computer science degree here at the University of Arkansas, and I got a scholarship through the Department of Defense. And so basically, they paid my last 2 years of college, but I owed them 2 years of work, and I ended up working in Virginia for 2 years. So.
Oh, okay. So you're a Whoa Pig Suey?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's. I never realized how big college football was till I got here, and here in the South, it's everything. Yeah. So and actually anything in the university is big here. So it's game day. You know it because there's flags. There's University of Arkansas flags everywhere. So.
Yeah, definitely not like back in Colorado and what do they call it? The country of Boulder or
the
Republic of Boulder.
Yeah, the Republic of Boulder. Yeah, essentially, a little commune in the middle of Colorado. So
communist.
Yeah. But yeah, I never even watched college football before I moved here. And but yeah, here it's everything. So I've been to a couple of games, and it's definitely an experience. Yeah.
Oh man, I would love to. I always think I should have lived in Texas or the South, just because I love college football, I love God, and I love barbecue. So it's just like
yeah. Oh yeah. It's amazing. It's pretty cool. It's a little religion down here, and
yeah, for sure.
It's also got good barbecue and everything else. So it's a good place to. And actually, Northwest Arkansas is quite a bit different than the rest of Arkansas. So it's you got some of the college crowd, and you also have Walmart and some other big corporations around here. But then you definitely got a lot of the South
or something like that.
Bentonville, yeah. and
Bentonville, that's right.
yeah, that's where Walmart started, and so it's Wally World around here for sure. You got
Mm.
vendors and everything else all over the place, so it's definitely pretty interesting.
How long have you been there for now?
We've been here a little over 10 years now. Like I
Oh,
said,
you've been there
in
for a while then.
yeah, for quite a while. Yeah, we moved to Virginia, like I said, for those couple of years. But then we saw the house here, and we unfortunately got the house right around when almost the worst time you could have, right around I think 2007 or 2008, and then everything kind
Oh,
of bottomed out. And
yeah.
so we weren't sure, what was going on, and we still had the house, so we ended up moving back. But it's definitely a nice place to live. So
I did not expect you to be in Arkansas. Do you guys have Mexicans over there?
yeah, go to Springdale, Arkansas, and that's Mexican Central. Everyone's like, I forget where I worked one time. I think I made a few people uncomfortable. I thought it was pretty funny. Somebody had said they wanted to learn Spanish, and they said, but the best way to do it is through immersion. You have to be maybe he said I might have to move to Mexico. I said, or you can just move to Springdale. It's the same thing. So it's
And
funny
they're looking
because
at you
Walmart.
like,
Oh, it's like well, they didn't know whether they could laugh at it or not. It's like go ahead and laugh. It's
yeah,
fine. Don't worry about it.
yeah.
But Walmart definitely knows their clientele because you go to certain WalMarts and they'll have a Hispanic
Yep.
food section, and it'll be like
Hmm.
a part of. And then you go to Springdale, and it's like a couple of rows. So they know
Oh,
their
really?
clientele. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
They've done the
Yeah, yeah,
research.
yeah. Even here in Arizona, like you'll go to one part of town and they'll have like a specific aisle at the front and it's got like, whatever kind of snacks and treats or whatever. And then you go into one that's like closer into Phoenix and they'll have like Takis and hot sauces. I was like, oh, like that's the aisle right there. They
Yeah,
know
well,
they know like
they know.
even by like I don't know if the zip code or the location. It's like oh they know who's shopping here and
Who
what's
their
gonna
clientele
move
is.
off
Yeah,
of the shelves.
yeah, for sure. So it's pretty interesting. So yeah, you just and you have some you can tell the sort of Tex-Mex restaurants and then the Mexicanos. So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that's where
Do
you
you
can kind
like
of
do you like
tell.
eating out? Do you like eating out Mexican food?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, the more authentic, the better. But
Uh-huh.
definitely, you definitely miss because I haven't been like around my mom, and she's, like I
Mm,
said, mom always makes the best Mexican food, right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
like whenever I get a chance to go over there, that's I need to have chile colorado and
Hmm.
just whatever special. Actually, your chile verde is amazing,
Yeah.
and but then you come here and it's like if you find something that's pretty close, you got to go
Mm-hmm.
there. Yeah,
Yeah, my wife, she liked to go eat Mexican food, but I always was like, I don't like going out to eat Mexican food because it's like
yeah,
I'd rather just, my mom makes good food, so
yeah,
I don't see the point. Like I could get better food here, so like I'd rather go get something I don't normally eat, like sushi or barbecue. Like I want to eat the stuff that I don't eat. Like I really
yeah.
don't want to go eat Mexican food, and plus it was never as good as what my mom made. Like I posted a picture, like I went to my mom's and she made gorditas. Some people call them sopes. And people are
Yeah.
like, dang, where's that at? It's like, that's my mom's. Like, do you know any Mexican restaurants? It's like, no, I don't, because I don't ever go out
Yeah,
to eat them. I don't really
yeah,
care for it.
yeah. There's some here that are close enough, replications of what my mom would make that it's fine, but there's nothing like it. When you go and visit my mom, you got to go and have whatever she's making, it's going to be awesome. So
Yeah, yeah, I agree, man. Something about that. Like, yeah, my mom could cook. All my tias cooked, so it was always like we'd go over there, and it was always like, yeah, I'm used to eating, good
yeah, and they're like,
food
oh,
that
we're
tastes good.
making some tortillas, and she's making like a stack this high. It's like that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Speaking of which, your Twitter handle cracks me up, man. What is the greatest thing since flat
Flat
tortillas?
tortillas. Yeah, like I
I
said, I
saw
mean,
that.
the
Like,
various places that I've worked and made people uncomfortable, just like because people don't know how to laugh at themselves anymore,
mhm.
and so it's like you take common expressions. Sometimes you just got to put a little twist on it,
Yeah.
and people, it really is funny how much we become kind of a PC culture, but
Hmm.
then when people are like comfortable around you, it's like, oh, that's why can't we laugh at that? It's
Yeah.
it's just it's something that we definitely lose. We lose camaraderie. We lose fellowship when we
Yeah.
have all these rules about what you can say and what you can't say. So if I
Yeah.
can make somebody laugh and make them more comfortable around me, all the better.
Yeah, I actually wanted to speak to you about that because like I think you're one of the funniest people on Twitter. Like I'm always looking for your comment and like your replies are always like so funny. I'm like, man, this dude is hilarious. What were like a lot of the influences for you? Were you just like a guy that liked to watch like a lot of funny things, or you have family get-togethers and you guys just cracking on each other? What like how was that for you?
And I was actually pretty shy.
All right, go ahead.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. Growing up, but the thing is, I've always loved stand-up comedians, and
Mm-hmm.
I think tweeted something else the other day about how people view comedy versus drama, and I think it really is very true. Is that everyone thinks they're a comedian, but not a lot of people are actually that funny.
Mm-hmm.
But then everyone thinks that like drama, like these dramatic actors, are all very serious and it must be so tough. It's like it's not really that tough to make somebody feel emotion and feel whatever else. Everyone's got a sad story. Everybody's got some way that they can move somebody emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
But to make somebody laugh, it's a little difficult. And so I've always like I love puns. Anytime I can try to, and that's I think we talked about it earlier about the importance of being bored, letting your mind
Mm-hmm.
ruminate on things. My best puns come at me when I'm just kind of sitting with my thoughts, and then I'll think about a phrase or a turn of phrase, and it'll be like, oh, how can I make this funny, or how is
Mm-hmm.
this, and it's just letting your mind work, it's just letting your brain
Yeah.
work. And I think that comedy does that a lot more than drama because drama is just kind of setting up for this emotion specifically, but
Mm-hmm.
comedy you almost have to have a formula in mind and be able to work that formula to get somebody to laugh. Because if not, it's kind of like there's some jokes that I've worked out, but I was like, you know what? I know this is not going to make anybody laugh because it's too complex and it just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work. But at the very least, there's thought that goes into it, and it's
Yeah.
like, and I'll can I give you an example? I'm going to tell
Yeah.
you right now. You're probably not going to laugh, but it's definitely something that makes your brain think. I set this out and I never get any kind of response like, why doesn't anybody get this? Okay. I see little known fact. Julius Caesar was the first person to tell a knock knock joke. He just got the punchline out before he died, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you think about that for a second, and whether he said this or not, this is what what William Shakespeare said. His last words were "et tu, Brute," right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
obviously, if it's a knock knock joke, you wind it back. The way it sets up is Julius Caesar says knock knock. Brutus says, but it's not funny. But it is I guess kind of smart. But at the very least, like I said, it gets. I think that and if you listen to like Bill Burr or Adam Carolla, or you listen to different comedians, and they talk about um, the reason they don't like people like recording their stuff, especially when they're working out an hour or working out their material,
Mm-hmm.
it's because some of their jokes aren't going to land because they're still working it out. And everyone
Yeah.
thinks that, oh, he's a professional comedian. He should always be funny. Why did he bomb this time? It's because it's just like it's just like a sculptor. He's getting rid of all the things that don't need to be there. He's figuring
Yeah.
out, oh, the audience laughed at this. They didn't laugh at this. And and that's why I really do think that comedy has a lot more craft to it than we give it credit for. But it just doesn't we'll never get that credit because everyone thinks that comedy's so easy.
Yeah, I think the same thing. Like, because I saw that tweet that's like, yeah, that's pretty spot on. Because I've always thought like people would say like, oh, like I'm funny, but I'm like, like yeah, I'm funny because like I'm usually playing off of something somebody said.
Right.
I don't just kind of like come out and like I have jokes. I was like, I don't have any jokes. Like
Right.
I don't have any jokes. It's just usually like somebody will say something and something in my mind will kind of trick and then I'll kind of flip it or whatever and have a comeback. That's it's kind of
Yeah.
how it works. I think that's why I'm like if you look at my replies, they're probably funnier than my actual tweets because it's just like, oh,
Yeah.
somebody said something like, okay, look, I'm gonna repackage it and take it into a different directions because
Yeah.
now it makes it funny because like what guy I'm kind of trained for like poop jokes and whatever inappropriate jokes because
Yeah.
it's to me it's easy to flip and plus like I had a lot of friends that like if you said something be like, oh man, like they would catch you on it and then get you. So like you had to get used to being able to like, oh, get them before they got you. So like
Exactly.
that was where a lot of it comes from. But to be
Right.
able to stand in front of an audience and start talking and make somebody laugh, to me is like, that's pretty crazy. Like,
Yeah, and I really do think that a lot of these people that think they're funny, and like I said, I feel that way a lot too. When it's and even if it's like a serious, like let's say a tweet, and it's like, oh, I find something funny about this, and I'll get a lot of reaction from it, and it's like, how often do I just have a tweet that's just by itself and is actually funny? It's like, oh, that's what being a stand-up is. I think a lot of people would squash that notion of I'm funny. It's like, okay, here's a microphone. These people don't right. They're not laughing right now. Go up there and make them laugh. A lot of people would be like, "Oh, that's where the skill is. That's where the difference is there." And that's what it comes down to. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people are funny with their friends. I'm probably one of them. I could be funny with my friends, but then I have friends who are funnier than me, so I don't say anything because it's like this dude's funnier. So like I want to listen to what he has to say because he's funnier than me. Like so like go ahead, have the floor or whatever.
Yeah, there's definitely that skill of just being able to generate that laughter. And so and also it's like, I think people have that sense also because they're usually in a group of friends and they know him and they know them and they can make them laugh and they'll and they think it's like, well, I made this joke because everyone knows the context of this is how this person is and I made them laugh. Right. But if you're in a group of complete strangers, and like keep saying the comedy is definitely a skill to make complete strangers not only think about what you've said, but then have the reaction of laughing. Whereas you talk about drama, we can all relate to something sad. When you say something about, oh, this family member died or this pet died or whatever else, we all have that remembrance, and so we can all relate, and so therefore we have that reaction. And so that's why I say that the difference is quite a bit different.
Yeah, because I think I had something. Because I listened to Adam Carolla too on his podcast, and I like Jerry Seinfeld and his Comedians in Cars. But somebody had said like something like dramatic actors can't be comedians, like play comedians, but comedians can play dramatic actors. Like you think of like Adam Sandler had a movie like after like 9/11, like I don't remember, Punch Drunk or something like that.
Oh, he had Punch Drunk Love, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. He had that one, and Will Ferrell had a serious movie too. And you're like, oh, goofy Will Ferrell. I was like, no, it was Stranger Than Fiction. I think that's what it was called.
Yeah.
And those were good movies. And I mean, as long as they're not like a typecast, like I remember like Al Bundy saying like he was typecast. So like no matter if he was like doing a serious movie, it was like, oh, look at there's Al Bundy. So he's kind of like typecast. But like I think they think they can kind of go back and forth because I think Dustin Hoffman had tried to be a comedian in a movie and it was just like you can't train, like you can train to be look like a Navy SEAL or something, but you can't fake the funny, the timing or whatever,
right?
Whatever that is, that you kind of have it or you don't.
Yeah, and that's the skill that gets developed. It's actually I think a funny muscle that gets developed by comedians, and they can then direct that towards dramatic comedy. For whatever reason, I don't think I've seen really that much of or that many examples of somebody who's dramatic who can then direct it towards comedy and actually be funny. And I really do think it's because funny just takes that skill that not a lot of people have, and then it develops it, and then with that they can then say, okay, I can be funny, but can I also do this dramatically? And I think it mostly only goes one way. It's pretty rare for it to go the other way around.
I actually talked to, I didn't talk to, but like I kind of tweeted Ed Lattimore about this because on his podcast we had talked about fighting, and that there there's no like champion fighters that come out of Beverly Hills because just the nature of fighting. It's like you're not going to go through all that grueling pain to be a fighter if you don't have to, or if there's not that will to win. I think that might be kind of the same with comedy because if you think like funny people, they come from like cold places. Like Kevin Hart is like from Philadelphia, Eddie Murphy, New York, Bill Burr I think is Boston. They kind of have Boston, that.
And I think a lot of comedians for whatever reason try to push against this a little bit. They're like, oh, you can be funny anywhere. But I think, I forget if it was Adam Carolla or somebody else might have actually, said something like this. But you start thinking about it. It's like, it's very true. It's like, why does it? And I really think it is. Oh no, I think it may have been a sports commentator. I forget who it was. It was like Colin Cowherd or somebody that had mentioned this. And I think what it is you have the funny, but you also have like this cold weather, and it's very isolating and whatever else. And it's like if all you have is a little bit of humor, that's all you're going to develop. Whereas in California or places that are sunnier or whatever else, like, yeah, you can be funny, but you also got like nice weather. You can feel, it's not the right environment for bringing out, because there is a little bit of misery or a lot of misery in comedy, whether you want to admit it or not. There is, and what you're really doing is you're taking the miserable and you're bringing some sort of humor out of it. You're like drawing it out like out of a stone almost. But that's where the skill comes in also. And so there's got to be, and I remember you mentioning that with Ed about no boxers from Hollywood, and it's kind of the same sort of thing. Is you have that skill. It's like I can fight, but I'm gonna do whatever it takes to become a good boxer, to lift myself out of my situation. All I know is fighting. This is what I've got to do because I've got no other choice, right? Yeah. And so that sort of environment really does breed that sort of person.
Yeah, because you think like, in California, because I grew up in California, and it's gorgeous. Like I didn't know that weather was an issue until I moved, because it's like, oh, it's summer. It's like, okay, we're in the 90s now, but at night it's cool. And then wintertime, it's going to rain a little bit. It's like, yay, let's get our jackets and let's put our windbreakers on. But I came to Arizona, and it was just like triple digits. Yeah. Like we were in the 118s last week. It's just like, oh man, like that. Like weather is a big deal, but I can't imagine in the cold weather states where it's like it's just miserable. So like you have like, you don't have to do anything to kind of get to like a happier medium or something. Like, you have your right. Baseline happy is higher just by being outside. Like you're fine. Like, oh, it's nice. Whereas like if you're miserable, it's like, well, how are we going to make this better? There's nothing around us to make it better. So let's make fun of something to be able to make us laugh. So then we can kind of take our minds off of how frigid cold it is, or how poor we are, or how whatever.
If the weather's trapping you inside, what other option do you have? Either stew in your misery, or make the best of the situation. And I think that's got to be where that funny comes from, where these,
what do you think
different
about
options
like the storytelling aspect? Because I think some of the comedians that are like, they're great storytellers also, like, who can kind of weave and kind of paint that picture in your head and see what what?
Yeah, there's definitely I love like we're talking about Bill Burr, because you do have some comedians like I think Stephen Wright. It's basically just set up punchline, and I think that's got its own skill, because you have to make an entire act out of, you say something and then you have a punchline and try to make it funny. Whereas Bill Burr, he's a good storyteller, and the best part is he does have a punchline, but all along, and it really is kind of like a movie or an act, whatever else, where you have little bits of action right in the middle, so you're not ever getting bored. He gives you a little bit of comedy, he tells a little bit more of the story, a little bit of comedy. And then at the end, you have like the big punchline, and that's definitely got a storytelling skill to it, mixed in with the comedy. And I think that's why he's kind of come out as one of the better comedians, especially like lately, because he's built that over years. And people kind of think that I hate the term overnight success or whatever else, where all of a sudden he's on. You'll see him in movies, and you'll see him in series, and you'll see him in whatever else. Like, yeah, but he's been doing this. He's been doing this since he had hair. So it's pretty amazing to kind of see that evolution. And you see one of his acts now, and it's like, how did he extract so much funny out of just a real simple story? And it's like, oh, it's all that skill that he put toward and being consistent with his comedy, and he just put it towards that storytelling ability, knowing that the funny is going to come out of it. And that's I think some of the best comedians are the best storytellers as well.
Well, it's funny that you said the overnight success, 'cause I'm trying to think back to when I first kind of really remember seeing him, and I think it was Chappelle Show, which is now like almost 20 years ago. So it's like, no, that's
Yeah,
not an
yeah,
overnight success, because even to be on Dave's show back then, like you already had to kind of have your, some kind of was it irons in the fire to kind of be able
yeah.
to be on that show. So I mean, we're talking over 20 years on that grind. But I think maybe part of it too might just be the fearlessness that he has. It's like
Oh yeah.
so refreshing, right, in a time where everybody's not even
And
pulling their punches. They're not even punching, and
no.
it's just like, there's
And,
nothing.
yeah, and with him, what's funny about him is he's probably not. I mean, he's not even like right at all. He's probably more left than it is. But he also is very honest about what his feelings are and how he views things. I mean, remember he was on Saturday Night Live, and people were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe he said that about the woke movement or about white women or about whatever it was." Like he just doesn't care. He's like, "Look, I'm going to give you my
Mhm.
honest opinion, and you're just going to have to deal with it because I don't care."
Yeah.
We keep coming back to these two guys, but the reason we do is because they basically are unapologetic. Him and Adam Carolla. I think it
Hmm.
was his last book. He basically said, "The first thing I want to say is I'm not going to apologize. I'm not
Hmm.
backing down. This is how I feel.
Hmm.
Go somewhere else with if you want your apology." And because of that, they don't. The woke mob doesn't bother him. They don't go after him because they know they're not going to get an apology. Because I mean, they just this guy that was in Mumford and Sons is
Yeah.
essentially leaving the band because he said something about a book that he wrote. He said, "Oh, basically acknowledging that he read this book and he enjoyed it." And then the mob comes out, and the first mistake he made was apologizing. And
Hmm.
then it's like, and then he has to keep backtracking, and then he's got to worry about what effect it's going to have to his bandmates or his family. It's like, okay, do we not know that this is? And unfortunately, the mob doesn't do subtlety. They're
Hmm.
all about, oh, this is a person that's in our crosshairs now. We have to get them.
Yeah.
And if you apologize, they're basically giving them permission to attack you more. And the only antidote to that is don't apologize. If that's how you truly felt, say this is how I feel. Go bother somebody else, and that's how you defeat the mob. But we
Don't
have
you?
a lot of cowards, unfortunately.
Yeah. Don't you think it's crazy that of all people, like Adam Carolla, like he did a movie with Dennis Prager, No Safe Spaces, where they went on college campuses, but
Yeah,
it's just like, this is Loveline guy. This is what was this? The Man Show.
man,
I
show,
think he did
yeah,
Crank. I think he was on Crank
pancakers,
Yankers too, which is
yeah,
pretty funny. But like, to see what he's
uh,
kind of turned into.
right. And the funny thing is, he'll often reference is that everyone like tells him, "Oh man, you've changed." It's like you're all right wing now, and this and this. And he's like, "No, no, no, go back to Loveline." And there's I think the whole Loveline or most of it, the archives are like on YouTube and other places. And you
Hmm.
listen to what he was espousing then, and it's the same thing that he's saying now. It's just that we've moved
Hmm.
so far to the left that
Hmm.
what he's saying now seems like it's right wing or whatever. It's like, no,
Yeah.
no, no. And the worst part though is that what he's saying is mostly common sense things that
Hmm.
people know. Hey, men and women are different. Oh my God, that's a radical viewpoint. I can't believe, especially scientists, supposed scientists, are also espousing these sorts of things because they don't want to get crushed by the mob because they're
Yeah.
cowards. They don't want to be crushed by the mob, so they basically will go along with what the new narrative is. So
It's you had a tweet that I thought was actually really good about the Matrix and Neo and Cypher, and I think
Cypher,
that kind
yeah,
of, yeah, that the Cypher is the guy that wanted to go back into the Matrix,
yeah,
right? That was
basically,
him.
who's basically going to betray everybody so that they can plug him back in, and he was going to be a millionaire or whatever else. Is like I just want I don't want to know that this ever happened to me, right? So
Hmm.
I was in the Matrix. I got out of the Matrix. I knew what it was. Now I want to go back. And whereas Neo, he's the one, he's whatever else, and so he essentially, or he symbolizes exceptionalism, right? Something different,
Hmm.
something great, something whatever. And Cypher is how did I put it?
Conformity, I think it was.
Conformity. That's right. And basically conforming to whatever the mob wants to do. And so I basically said it's like most people think that in the Matrix they'd be Neo, but a
Hmm.
lot of people would be Cypher. And you look at how quickly people conform to, oh, put a mask on. put two masks on. Take
Mhm.
this. They say this now, and it's like they accept whatever narrative they're given, and they I don't know how many times they got to be burned by the mainstream media before them to finally realize, okay, maybe they're not telling us the whole truth or
Yeah.
any part of the truth. And instead of being critical thinkers, and that's what I mean, that's one of the big one of my big messages is always critical thinking versus binary thinking. And critical thinking is being able to take in all the information and then formulating your own hypothesis, formulating your own your own idea of what the truth is, versus just taking what is given to you by whomever, the mainstream media or a celebrity even sometimes, and saying, oh, that
Mhm.
must be the truth because this popular person said it. And anybody who says anything contrary to that must be lying to me or must be the enemy. And so it's really disconcerting how many people have bought into that. Especially in this country where we used to be full of rugged individuals, right? That's
Mhm.
the old line, the rugged
Right.
individualism. You think about how the country was founded. People that went across the ocean before they knew, what all was here. Half the people were probably going to die of either starvation or malnutrition or who knows what. They get
Mhm.
here and there are hostile forces here. The land is hostile. It's uninhabited. They have to build everything, and then once everything's set up, more people wanted to keep on going west. They go west into the Appalachians and into the Midwest, and I mean, you basically
Mhm.
have these rugged individuals that are here, and that's what America was founded on, that idea of individualism, and even if it's tough, we're going to make it. And to
Yeah.
see us devolve into kind of a bunch of sheep who are waiting for someone on TV to tell us what to think next is really disconcerting, and it's very contrary to how we were founded.
I think I don't even know if it's the we're going to make it. I think it's just like, well, we're going to try anyway even if we don't make it. I think that might be it. Like
Yeah,
when we started our first recording, we had talked about movies that were worth watching. I think the one that actually coming to mind when you said that was Ford versus Ferrari. I don't know if you've seen that one.
yeah, yeah,
And that was like the most we're Americans big dick energy movie I've seen in a long time, because it was
yeah,
basically like we're Ford, those Italians over there have these nice cars and they kick our ass all the time. We're just gonna do this just because we're Americans, and
yeah,
that was it. And we're gonna do that, and then spoiler alert, whatever, blah blah blah. You should have seen the movie. It's come out like 3 years ago, but the
yeah,
guy Christian Bale loses the race at the end, and all he says is like, "You didn't promise me I'd win. You just promised me the ride." And it was like, yeah, that's it. It's the ride,
yep,
man. Like, it sucks. All that stuff that kind of went on with him, that sucks. But it was just like, it was all about the ride, and I was like, man,
yeah,
this might be the most. Uh, like, I think there was like a cynicism that kind of happened after 9/11. Like, everything became very much cynical after that, and I think this was the most pro America movie I've seen that I can think of off my head that wasn't like any kind of like militarily involved or anything like that that I can think of. The only other one I can think of was Sully, with Tom. I also
Tom
said Tom
Hanks.
Cruise, Tom Hanks.
Yeah,
It was just like, him, just a regular guy, kind of going about his thing, doing a good thing. But this one was different, because it was like, yeah, like that was like, that's how kind of how it used to be. This guy was like was he like a fighter pilot? What's his
yeah,
name? Shelby
yeah,
was like
yeah,
was like a fighter pilot, and it's like, this guy's just like kicks ass, and then he comes here and he's like, oh, kick some more ass, and it was just like,
yeah,
oh man, like that is those are the stories, and I actually kind of want to talk about it, because like that's one of your things too, right? It's just like telling these stories. I don't know how you put it, because I was reading your book, and you had talked about the importance of telling stories. I think that's really important, because like, as being somebody who's very practical, I'm very practical. I want everything to be kind of useful. It's like, okay, how's this going to make money? How, everything has to, but stories, I think, go over that, and in the long term, they serve you in ways that you didn't realize, because um like I grew up listening to the stories of the Bible, and that, those stories deeply affected me. But the stories that we tell each other now, like those also affect us. Where did that come for you? Like this the love of stories, and just the realization that, hey, like the stories that we're telling ourselves now, as I don't know if it's Americans, people, men, whatever, they're not very helpful. Like
Yeah.
let's tell better stories.
Yeah. And just going back to Ford versus Ferrari for a second, there are definitely a few movies out. They're actually very surprised that even get made now, because there's
Mm-hmm.
such an anti-American sentiment, especially in Hollywood, but in kind of elitist circles in general. And so it's actually pretty surprising that those sorts of things get
Mm-hmm.
made at all, because it's kind of a pro-American story. But you're definitely right. Like I said, with the stories of the Bible, for sure that you have dual and even more reasons for a lot of those stories. Is like you have the actual stories and knowing the people that were involved in Christianity and setting it up and going through there. But all the while, there's also lessons to be learned from all those stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so and you're right. It's definitely the stories that we tell ourselves, and the stories that are impactful to us, and the stories that have meaning to us. And that's one of those things. One of the things that I thank my stepdad the most for is that he gave me a love of learning, and he had books around. Always he had shelves and shelves of books, and so it really kind of got me started pretty early on reading, and eventually kind of thought, what, I might be able to write, and I got started writing pretty late, but at the very least, it says I've got some stories to tell, but I don't want them just to be a narrative. I want them to have a meaning behind them, and that's definitely where storytelling is very important. And if you have a story to tell, and whether it's your personal story or just if they end up being like an allegory or something that you can imbue on somebody else and has an impact on somebody else, it's important, because then it kind of launches them into their career of telling a story as well.
Yeah, well, so because you wrote your own story, right? Was it going gone?
Going Gone, yeah, and it's an anthology. It's actually 12 short stories, but they're all connected in one way or another. They're not directly connected, but essentially, the way it set itself up is, if you know anything about World War One, it all kind of got started when Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, right? And that kind of was like a chain reaction, and all of a sudden the world was at war. And I kind of thought to myself, okay, what if something like that were to happen today, and how would it impact like the United States specifically? Because most of the stories are based around the United States, but also, can I tell a story, like some allegories within those stories, in order to tell this complete story essentially? And what it ends up being is I take 12 different viewpoints of people, like one of them is like about the president, and one of them is about people in the military. Another one's about but a lot of it is
Mm-hmm.
I use those stories as a way to show, like with a couple of them that have celebrities involved, how like vapid and how foolish it is of us as a society to put these people up as idols, because
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of thinking to them, and they don't really, they're mostly thinking about themselves and thinking about how they can improve themselves, and they're not really thinking about making other people better. And it's like you really should be concentrating on yourself and your family and making your
Mm-hmm.
life better, rather than thinking, oh, I wish I was this famous person, I wish I was this, because it's that false idol worship that kind of pushes our society into places where we really shouldn't go. We're seeing a lot of it today too.
Yeah.
You have these false idols, and you don't ever get anything but destruction out of those, right? And then
Yeah.
you also talk about, like, a couple of them are about the kind of the importance of fathers and the legacies that they leave behind. And I think that one of the things that we're seeing in society also is that negation, that the absence of fatherhood,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't really see fathers as being very important. You look at,
No.
like, if you talk about something like BLM when they first came out, and I remember when they first came out a few years ago, and I specifically went to their website and I started searching for the word father, or dads.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Nowhere to be found. And they're
Mm-hmm.
actually talking about like, community-based family, and how the nuclear-based family was some, I forget how they
They want to
put it
abolish
especially,
it or
but like
something.
it was a structure of the patriarchy and a structure of
Mm-hmm.
white supremacy or white nationalism. I'm like, the nuclear family being having a mom and dad raising their kids,
Yeah.
but realistically, it's like you're never going to replace the father. You're never
Mm-mm.
going to. You could have a very exceptional coach or teachers or a system, but you really need mom and dad at home
Yeah.
with the kids, because studies have shown this. You have households without a father, and not very good things happen. You have lower graduation rates, more drug use, more arrests, more pregnancies, teen pregnancies, and you have all these things that happen because you don't have that guidance. But we're also kind of told, oh, you know what? There's no difference between men and women, and single mothers are heroes, and they do just as good a job as two parents. Well, we're seeing that that's not true,
Right.
and so, like I said, stories are a way to imbue that kind of message as well. It's like, hey, fathers
Yeah.
are important. We need fathers around.
Well, yeah, yeah. I guess it kind of goes back to the stories that we tell, how important they are, because the story that's being told is that they're not important, but when the facts are very clear that they are important. Like there was even one study where it was like if you had a kid that did not have a father in the home, but there was like fathers in the neighborhood that improved them. Just the fact that there was fathers in the neighborhood
Right.
improved the neighborhood. And it was like, oh wow, like it's not even in his own home. Going
Right.
back to your story, the going on, so you have the one event in World War I, and then you have the 12
Yeah.
perspectives from that's really
Uh,
cool, man. That is really cool.
yeah. It's an anthology. It basically has that as a central theme, and then some of them only like kind of reference that what's happened, kind of like as a side event. Other ones are directly involved with that. So like you have an ex CIA director who knows what's coming, and
Hmm.
he's basically making sure that his son, who's across the country, is going to be prepared for what's going to happen, because most of the country
Hmm.
doesn't know how bad it's going to get, but it's going to get
Yeah.
bad. And then you
How
have
long? How long did it take you to write all that?
once I got serious about it, it probably took me about 6 or 7 months, and
Hmm.
I'd write one short story, and I kind of had in mind what more or less what all the short stories were going to be about. I just had to write them out, and then once I'd written them out, I'd send them to my sister just to kind of get
Hmm.
another point of view, and make sure that like what I wanted to say was kind of getting across.
Hmm.
And then little by little, I got them all done, and then I went through and edited them and proofread them, and then I had her proofread them kind of as a final result or whatever else. And then over time, I've found a few other ones, and luckily, Technologies makes it so that it's not that hard to go ahead and update files and get everything more proofread. But yeah, it took me about probably all told, it took me about 6 or 7 months to get everything all done.
Outstanding. One of the things in your book, because I got your book on Gunmore. What was that called again? Sorry, the writing
Which
book.
one? Oh, I'm trying to think what it is called. Is let me take a look real quick. Uh, it's something about storytelling. I'm having a complete brain fart right now. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, there you go. Creating new mythologies, and
Creating,
that's
yeah.
a story. It's a story. It's basically a primer for like new authors or new storytellers. Basically, if you're writing short stories or even blog posts or just starting off, trying to write a book, it's kind of a guide, and I kind of broke it up into the why and the how to start writing the story. And
Hmm.
the why is and that's the thing that frustrated me the most was I wanted to write these stories, this anthology, and but it was really difficult getting started, because the thing that I struggle with the most is the idea of writing a story and it's not good enough, it's not
Hmm.
perfect, and knowing, oh man, I didn't convey this correctly, or I didn't convey this the way I want to. And the more experience you get, the more you kind of uh, get to the point where written is better than perfect. because once you have
Right.
something written out, you can edit it. You can go through and make it perfect. But perfect in your head doesn't mean anything. It's just that's all it's ever, because if it's perfect in your head and the next day you go out and you get hit by a bus, guess what? That perfect story is going to die with you. But if
Yeah.
you actually get it written out, you can go in there and you can chop it up. You can make it better. You can make it better, and eventually it's going to be as close to perfect as possible. And you can kind of go from there. And that's the
That's funny
real
that
big
you
push.
it's funny that you say that, because I was like, I wanted to bring up the perfect part, and you kind of naturally went into that. That was like something I specifically was going to be like, all right, let's make sure we kind of talk about this, because I had that in my head. I was like, I think that's a lot of what I struggled with, was like, even like doing something like this was like, well, I don't have the right this or that or whatever. It's like, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. Like, I work on my intros, like that's all me kind of like messing around with stuff. It's like, technology is not my strong suit. I think Twitter has been helpful for me because I don't like my writing. Like, it's always been something I've been very self-conscious of. So just like for me to put stuff on Twitter at first was very like, I don't know if nerve wracking, but it's just like, hey, they're gonna see that I write like a moron. So, like,
Yeah.
but now it's just like, I'm just gonna send it now. But but the perfection is it really does stop you from doing a lot of things, because I want things to be high caliber, be like, oh, like Joel does things at a high caliber, or whatever you know whatever it is, I want it to be a high caliber. I think that's natural for a man to want to do something, like, I don't want it to be like some, piece of junk. Like, I don't want people to think that it's a piece of junk, but sometimes, like, hey, like, it, I think hopefully the podcast, like, this is like season 2 of my podcast, like, so hopefully it's better than season 1, because like I think when I first started, like, they were really long, and I wasn't sure like how was I going to introduce guests, because like if you watch Joe Rogan, like, who Joe Rogan is, and who his guests are. That's why you're watching. So he doesn't have to introduce. But like for me, I was like, well, these are we're just regular people. Like, so do I have to give all that backstory? But now I've kind of found, like, what, I just want to get in and just kind of start talking, and then we'll go from there. Like, I don't have like written questions. I have ideas in my head, but it's like I needed to let go of that idea of being perfect and just start
Right.
doing it. And it's been a lot of
Because
fun, man.
more often than not, perfect is going to just keep you, it's going to hold you back, because you're
Mm-hmm.
thinking, oh, as soon as I get this done or this ready, then I'll start.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's always going to delay you.
Right.
And what you got to do is say, you know what, I can always do perfect later on. It's better to just get it started. And even and a lot of the times I'll come back to this. When I went to back to school, and I'd never done any programming, any coding, anything else like that. And it's funny because I went back and there were all these kids that had probably been programming since like the 6th grade. So the
Yeah.
first like semester or two was like practice to them. It was nothing to them. But I remember one of my first programming instructors basically saying, if you had all the time in the world to do this, like this first project that I'm having out there, what I would do is I tell you, okay, start writing this project, and then when you're just about done, take all that code and delete it all, throw it out, and then do it again. And then when you're almost done with that, delete it all again. But the thing is, it's like you maybe all deleting all that code, but you'll still have the knowledge you had from the first couple of times, and you'll also know how to do things more efficiently, and you'll be able to see the mistakes you made the first time, but you'll never know that until you start doing,
Mm-hmm.
right? You'll never know all these things. And he also had this little allegory of like video games.
Mm-hmm.
Who goes through like the first level of Mario the first time? You've never seen Mario Brothers before. You go through it and you play it. Who does that exactly perfectly the first time? Almost nobody, because you don't know where the enemy is. You don't know where this
Yeah.
brick
Yeah.
is. You
Yeah.
don't know whatever.
Mm.
But then you've done it 1,000 times before, and you run through that level like it's nothing, and it's just that experience. But you have to
Yeah.
actually have that experience first. And so, like I said, I read somewhere, or somebody said something, that if you read something you wrote like a year ago or 2 years ago and you don't cringe, then you haven't progressed at all. And so, why not start now? You're gonna make mistakes. Everyone does.
Yeah.
So you might as well start now. And in a year from now, you'll say, you know what? Look at how much I progressed. And the only reason you progressed is because you started. And so
Yeah.
you look at some of your old podcasts. Hell yeah, you could have done something different, but so what? Now you know better, right? Now you know
Yeah.
better. And in a year from
Yeah.
now, you're going to come back and look at this one. You're going to say, Abe's, probably a little uglier than I thought he was. But other than that, I could have done stuff better. But look at me now.
Hey, don't talk
Now I'm
about my
doing stuff
family
even
that
better.
way, man.
Yeah. And really, that's one of the things that we lose when we. And I think we've done ourselves a real big disservice with saying that everyone should go to college, and the trades are kind of only for like poor people or if the last no people that do trades and do things with their hands and get that experiential learning, they learn that stuff and it sticks. And the reason it sticks is because they have to actually go out there and get it done and actually do
Yeah.
things with their hands, and instead of just reading something, because you can have all the theory in the world, but until you have to apply it in the real world, it's meaningless. And so, why not start today?
Do you think I think part of it goes to the being bored aspect, right? You're like you don't give yourself enough time to be bored to actually like create something like
Yeah.
like I like for me the podcast it took me a long time to even get to like the my very first episode. I had it recorded I think a year before I actually um like kind of like put
Put it
because
out.
like I was all the other stuff kind of got in the way of it for me. And I use like different software and stuff like that. So I think the boredom is something that comes with the perfectionism, but I actually think that like computers might be part of it too, right? Because like everything you see
Right.
now is like really well like done, like graphics and things like that. I think it might intimidate people from like starting something because like you talk about like the trades, right? Like when you start off, like your stuff starts kind of rough, but you can
Oh
see
yeah.
it, right? And most people understand that it's going to be kind of rough. But with like technology being so good, like you can make things look nicer than they really are. I'm kind of spitballing, but I think that might be kind of part of it, right? Like if I'm going to fix something that's hands on, like that takes effort. But like for me to kind of plug in some USBs, like that doesn't really take a lot of effort. I just kind of have to know where they go. So I don't know. There's
Right.
like a different intimidation factor that comes in with that perfectionism. It's like, yeah, because you can see things that are done really well, and then so if you put something out that like say your book cover doesn't look like somebody else's book cover, it's like, oh, I know I can make
Yeah.
it better than
Yeah.
that. Like I can maybe if dollars or whatever, but I think that the technology makes the perfection look more attainable.
But it
And
also hinders you because you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to do anything until I make it look this perfect.
mhm,
But
yeah,
the thing that I think that ends up happening that you have to just accept, and I think it's hard for people that want that perfection or that they have that hang up. But one of the things you have to accept is the quality will show through, because you can
mhm,
have all the great graphics and great thumbnail
mhm,
and this and this and this and this.
yeah,
But if somebody goes and starts listening and the actual content isn't that great, it's like, yeah,
yeah,
it looks great, but why am I not entertained? And what it comes down to is um, just start getting your content out there, and
mhm,
the quality will show through. And the thing is, if you're passionate about it, that passion will show through as well.
yeah,
And all the other stuff can come later, but first and foremost, that quality has to show
yeah,
that you want it to be there. So that's I think the big hurdle that a lot of people have to get over in order to get to where they want to go.
yeah. Just building the actual skill instead of the aesthetic. I think
Right.
I think we kind of talked about that, right? Like in originally we talked about movies. Now it's like there's the story there's a lot of sizzle, but the steak isn't there when you should have been working
Yeah.
on the steak, and that's the part that actually takes time where you have to fall a lot over and over and over and over again to kind of get to where it's like, okay, my content is something that's a kind of a standalone thing where it's like, hey, if you took away these things, it's still something that's enjoyable. I think we talked about like the Twilight Zone. It's like, oh man, like I watch those with my kids. It's like, man, these are great. These are because
Right.
they very much get down to the root humanness of things, or the reality, or just the story is just that good. Like there's the one episode. It's the guy from I think it's the guy from Rocky, Mickey.
Oh
He's
yeah.
like, go ahead.
Burgess Meredith. Yep.
Burgess Meredith. Yeah, so he's working in a bank and he loves books. And
Yep.
then there's like an earthquake or a nuclear war, and he's in the
A
vault and
nuclear
he has
war.
all
Yeah.
these books. and he breaks his glasses, and you could just feel
Yeah.
like this is all the guy wanted was to read these books, and now he has all of
Yes.
it and all the time in the world, and now he can't read because of his stupid glasses.
Right. And that's the whole point. And what's funny though is that you'd have, YouTubers or commenters or people would say it's like, oh, look at this episode. Those effects are so, they're so bad. They're so, dated. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, then you've missed the point
Yeah.
because episode per episode, there's so much content and so much to be gained from watching
Mm-hmm.
that the effects are like almost like not even worth talking about. And then something like that, all there really is there's nothing to do with aesthetic really. It's all about the story,
Or, yeah.
and the effect that you have is like because you feel for that guy because he's in his own little world and
Mm-hmm.
people kind of write him off and all he I
Right.
mean the thing in the world that's gonna make him the most happy is just to be able to read he's basically
Yeah.
just existing just so he can get to his book and just start reading, and
Yeah.
now he has all the time he wants, and then even that's taken away from him,
Yeah.
and it's just like, oh wow, how cruel can the world
How
be,
cruel. Yeah. Oh
yeah.
man. That's such a
And so
great
it's
episode.
yeah, it really is,
What
and
is
it's also amazing.
the
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
what is the narrator? What's his name? Roger?
Oh,
Roger
Rod Sterling.
Rod Sterling. He even like
Yeah.
his voice. I think he has such a great voice. Just like that whole intro when he's like narrating the story of everything. It's just like, oh man, I don't know if you get that from smoking cigarettes or just like whatever, but like I'd almost want to like smoke cigarettes just so I could have like that
Just to get that voice, right? Just that timbre in your
yeah,
voice.
yeah, yeah, like
And just the introductions and just and like I said, is that there was obviously a lot of craft, but a lot of passion that went into
mhm.
those stories, and it's something that's definitely lacking because nowadays it seems like, oh, the aesthetic will make up for that passion, and
Mhm.
it really won't. After a while, you start taking a look at things, and it just doesn't. It has something missing, and that quality is missing. Is what's going
I
on.
think there's a new show, Black Mirror. I never saw it, but somebody had told me about it, and it sounded so vulgar. I was like, I don't want to watch it because
Yeah,
it sounded. Did you ever watch that show?
I watched like the first one is definitely very. I don't know the first episodes. There's a few that are actually very interesting. The
Hmm.
concepts of them because they do take a lot of concepts of what's going on with technology today, and it just kind of pushes
Hmm.
it a little bit forward. And you can definitely see a lot of these things happening. But then, and I think somebody had told me that like the last couple seasons actually have gotten kind of woke, and you're getting a lot more of that narrative. And unfortunately, you're seeing that a lot more.
Mhm.
And so you definitely see a lot of influence from something like the Twilight Zone, and in something in some of these things. But unfortunately, it seems as though most or all of entertainment is bowing down to the altar of woke,
Uh,
and so you just have to kind of accept that that's kind of what's happening.
yeah, because I like the idea of like, hey, not I guess redoing something like the Twilight Zone because I mean the stories. I mean they're standalone stories and they're incredible. They're well thought out, and I mean there's hits and misses just like anything, right? Like, but
Yeah,
I just think that maybe this kind of comes to the boredom thing. It's like because they didn't have the uh what's the word, the ability to have all these special effects that all you can rely on is the story and the content, right? So you don't because you don't
right.
have the bells and whistles, like so there's I can't lean on the bells and whistles that I don't have or constraints of the budget and things like that. And so not that they didn't have a budget or whatever, but just they couldn't have crashing cars and all this fun stuff that I enjoy it, but man, the stories themselves are incredible. And I think going back to the technology and the aesthetic of things, like watching the Matrix, like people do that kind of. I remember going. So just kind of as an example, I remember watching Terminator 2 and watching when he would shapeshift and it would be like that silver liquid metal kind of thing, and it was just like mind
Yeah,
blowing. Like, oh my gosh, did you
yeah,
see that? And I remember like
yeah,
4 or 5 years later, there was a Capri Sun commercial, and like they did the same thing while like a kid was skateboarding. And one of my cousins was like, "Isn't that crazy that this was like in Terminator?" And we were like mind
yeah,
blown by that. And now they're doing this on this like Capri Sun commercial of all things. It's just like a
yeah,
Capri Sun throwaway. So it's just like how
yeah,
fast the technology had moved. But watching the Matrix, like you still watch it. I'm like, this is a good movie. Like the story is
yeah.
amazing. Like
And
even
that's I think one of the best where they merge where the CG and the computer the computer graphics and the technology and everything else is justified because they're telling a story, but the story behind it
Mm-hmm.
is just top notch, and it's a perfect marriage of the both. And I think that may have been the watershed moment where they kind of went, off the rails and said, okay, we're only going to do CGI, and we're only going to do, we're going to tell stories with computers,
Mm-hmm.
and the story is just going to be, the actual narrative is going to be kind of a sideline, and it'll be good enough. And we definitely have lost our ability to tell really good stories in a lot of, at least I think a lot of Hollywood has, because
Mm-hmm.
CGI and technology has become such a crutch. And,
Right.
I think
Right.
one of the biggest examples, you take a look at the first Star Wars and all the things they had to do just to get that thing, made. Have you ever take a look at? Have you ever see the documentary Empire of Dreams? And they basically, like the skin, like the outside of the Death Star, is all a bunch of models for like battleships and stuff. It's
Mm-hmm.
glued together, and then they would take a camera like going by, and they'd blow parts of it up, whatever else. So those are all like basically essentially practical effects. And it's
Yeah.
all these things they had to invent just to make this movie. And now
Yeah.
you look at and I really think that the prequels, the actual story is actually pretty prescient about authority and how it gets abused and everything else, but the execution kind of fails in some ways quite a bit because there's such a reliance on technology. Everything has to be CGI. Everything has to
Mm-hmm.
be a blue screen and everything else, and it looks fake. And I think it really takes away from the actual story.
Yeah, it's
And I think there's
episodes
a big
one, two, and three, right? Because that's how it goes. It
yeah,
goes
exactly.
four, five, six, and then one, two, three.
Yeah, and so you lose the humanity of the story because you're relying completely on computers, and it's kind of I think that's a good counterpoint of when he didn't have all the resources and all that technology, they
Mm-hmm.
made do, and they still made a really amazing movie because they had to. They're backs to the wall. Okay, we're gonna make this happen, and I think that
Yeah.
that's where we kind of can definitely lose a lot of our story when we rely too much on the aesthetic sort of
Yeah,
thing.
because I think that came out in like 1999, and if you look at like 1999, I remember Saving Private Ryan came out, and I think the next year it was Gladiator. But I can't think of
Yeah,
another movies that back to back were were as like powerful as like those two movies. Because I mean, as teenage boy, like watching those movies, I was like, oh my gosh, like
yeah,
who doesn't want to like feel like that camaraderie and that fight of like, hey, we're gonna do something as soldiers, and then who doesn't want to be Maximus and know that they can
yeah,
stand up to the most powerful person in the empire and fight your way for honor, all those things that really resonate with a man. Like I can't think of like anything like after that comes close to being as powerful as like those two movies. Like there was other movies in there, like I think there was like Life is Beautiful, but I mean like big, what's the word, epic movies.
epics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
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 epics.
and that's one of the things that we definitely lose when I think for one we stop recognizing words like honor and like and knowing that that people sacrificed a lot for the freedoms we have today. They
Hmm.
willy nilly will reference Normandy, but they don't really know what we know. None of us know what it was like. But
Yeah.
to really put ourselves in those shoes and say, oh, people went into this knowing they're very likely going to be either killed or very
Yeah.
seriously hurt, but we're going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And when we stop recognizing that sacrifice and we instead try to reframe it as, oh, but those people didn't, they probably didn't like black people, or they probably weren't this or whatever else,
Hmm.
or they take it the way that completely around. They say, oh, look, they're Antifa just like this, just like I am. I'm like, do you guys not know what they were fighting against, and
Yeah.
do you not
Yeah.
see the tyrannies that you guys are introducing, and you see that incongruous viewpoint. We definitely lose something there. And like I said, unfortunately, we don't see a lot of that anymore because it's just not. It's not what's being sold.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was as soon as we started calling masculinity toxic, then we completely we reframed a lot of what men have sacrificed
Hmm.
for freedom and for not only this country but for countries around the world, and we basically just kind of tossed it aside flippantly and said, yeah, but those men were toxic. We're so much more sophisticated now. It's like,
Hmm.
not really. We're basically just basking in the ease that those
Right.
men allowed us to
Yeah.
have, right? And
Yeah.
and the thing is, it's not gonna it won't last forever, because history tells us that societies that have it too good for too long eventually get taken over. So
Yeah.
we should recognize what's been sacrificed. We recognize that we have it good because of the sacrifices of our previous generations, and try to build on it instead of trying to basically rewrite that history.
Yeah. The I have this thought, but part of it is like it's really easy to judge people from the past, but it's like, hey, you, the lives they led was a lot harder than the lives we live. Like there's a kind of like a cold shower corner of Twitter. It's like take a cold shower, and it might be kind of silly, but it's just like, well, the world is like so comfortable that you have to make a choice to take a cold shower now, which seems like a small thing, but it's like it's so
Yeah.
comfortable. Like things are really so comfortable, and it's very easy to have all the right views when everything is so comfortable. Like
And
there's no
yeah,
struggle. Like the only time I ever really took cold showers was when I had to go visit Mexico.
yeah.
Like
But you
here,
kind of
like
had to, and we're like, what is this? The Middle
yeah,
Ages?
yeah, like like you took as I remember as a kid like coming back from the beach and we'd take a shower, like we had to take a bath outside in like the wash tub. Like
Yeah. We said,
there's
yeah,
that this is kind of where we did it, and I I loved it because it was like the novelty of it, but it's easy, man. Like it's so easy. Like it's
yeah,
please like there's a what is it, the ungratitude. It's like you don't realize what people did before you and how to go through for you to have it this easy.
yeah,
Like I go back to like I don't know how to fix anything because I can just like the USB fits perfectly into its USB slot. Like there's no struggle there. Like I don't have to like put anything together. It's you go to IKEA, all the parts are there for you, and so you have all the equipment you need, and you just put it together. And people now struggle with that. It's like, yeah, IKEA guy, you can't even put together some furniture from IKEA. You're talking about a guy over here that built roads, in
right.
the blazing sun, like these highways that you drive on, like that was not
Yeah,
easy.
yeah.
They built
Who
frigid
built
cold,
those?
the railroads, all that stuff, blasting
Yeah,
through the Rockies to have a railroad for you to even get to this point. Like, man, you don't like watch out like who you're blaming, man. You don't know what people dealt with to be able to get to this point.
yeah. And that's it's of entitlement, that brings all great civilizations down, because
Mm-hmm.
eventually, and it's one of my favorite passages from Going Gone, is it references Genghis Khan, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he basically built this empire out of these horsemen, these hordes of horsemen who are excellent archers and everything else. But they took on the Chinese, they took on all these different armies and defeated them basically all. But he made sure that his fighters were always rugged and always just ready, because he didn't allow them to have all the spoils of their war. Right, he
Mm-hmm.
made sure that they were, they weren't clothed in fine clothing, and had the best of this. It's like, no, no, no,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to keep to our roots, because that's what has gotten us here. And as
Yeah.
soon as a society basically says, yeah, that was good enough for them, but we're going to go ahead and enjoy all these things, and we're going to,
Mm-hmm.
allow ourselves to have all the fruits of our labor. But not only that, we're going to think that, we're entitled to this. We should have the greatest of all, and not acknowledging the struggles that previous generations went through to get that to them. That's when you slowly start ebbing away at that empire. And unfortunately, we think that, oh, we're a world power. I mean, United States is a world power. We're always going to be a world power. That's not a
Mm-hmm.
given. And
Mm-hmm.
and and the quicker we realize that, the better off we'll be. But we're also being sold a different bill of goods. Not only is America evil, but we should do more for the world, or we should do all these things. But not only that, but we're founded on evil people. So let's not even
Mm-hmm.
look at our forefathers as being
Yeah.
any kind of great people. And it's like, yeah, we're
As heroes.
basically
Yeah.
tearing down our own foundation, is what we're doing
Yeah.
right
Which
out
is
from under
crazy,
us.
man. Well, Abe, I think we've this is our kind of our second attempt here, so I think
Yeah, no
this
problem.
will be a good kind of landing spot for us.
Yeah,
Did you want to any kind of last thought here before we start wrapping up? I know you have Going Gone, that's on Amazon,
yeah,
and you also have your writing course, Creating Mythologies. Can they find that on your
yeah.
website?
Yeah, have that on there as well. And then I have like I think like 4 or 5 short stories on my website as well. If you want to take a look at my writing, and what I'll probably end up doing is get together some of those other short stories other than anthology, and put that into like a little bit of a book in the future as well. And I'm actually in the process of writing like my first narrative book, my first novel, and hopefully get that written sooner rather than later. I'm hoping end of the summer or so to have the actual first draft done. So
Very cool, man. So this is Abe Lopez, my guest today. You can find him on Twitter at Abe Lopez Author. You can also find his website on his website at the same Abe Lopez Author. Abe, thanks so much for coming on today and dealing with the issues with technology today. So if this sounds kind of choppy when I put it out, that's the reason. I'm trying to gonna try and get this all solidified. But thank you so much for tuning in, Abe. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure, brother.
thanks for having me. Thanks.